Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this episode of God Talk, I want to revisit the rise and fall of Gateway. It's just a little over a year. Last June was when Robert Morris stepped down and the wheels came off of the Gateway bus. And so I thought it would be good to just kind of revisit it, because last week, as I was talking about the Epstein, Ozzy, and Coldplay, I talked about during the Epstein part of it, like this whole concept of drain the swamp. Um, you know, MAGA was saying that you had to drain the swamp. That's how Trump got elected. And in fact, there is a swamp. You can't deny it. The last week or so, a bunch of new files have come out that have shown that Clinton, Biden, and Obama were all involved in kind of creating this false document, the Steele dossier. It was created to try to sabotage the 2016 elections for Trump. So there's a swamp. But last week we talked about, like, Republicans have a swamp too. Republicans only want to drain the Democrats' swamp, and the Democrats only want to drain the Republican. And the reason that we're not having all these Epstein files come out is because the Republicans, well, they're not completely comfortable draining their own swamp. There's probably a little bit of a combined swamp, you might say, when it comes to those Epstein files. Well, not only is there a swamp in politics, remember I said at the end of the podcast, I said that everyone has a swamp. Everyone has a history. Everyone has a past that you just kind of throw it in the swamp, let it sink to the bottom, and hope no one ever sees it. You get these droughts, and like all of a sudden, like, these dinosaur footprints come out that no one even ever knew were there. When the swamp gets drained, you find bodies, you find abandoned automobiles, you find all kinds of things when the swamp gets drained. So we have to be careful how we judge, how we throw rocks at others, because everyone's got a swamp. Well, not only does everyone have a swamp, not only do the Republicans have a swamp, not only do the Democrats have a swamp, guess what? Even churches have swamps, and some more than others. And I'd say that's what was going on with this whole Gateway thing, that over the last year, the swamp's been draining. And as it drains, we're getting to see more and more from the inside out of some of the shenanigans and sometimes outright just evil that had been going on within the Gateway organization. You remember that Morris molested a 12-year-old when he was in his 20s, mid-20s, I think. He's 63 now, so it's like 43 years ago. 40 years ago, we'll just say, after it happened, it broke. I shouldn't say 40 years after it happened, because it went on for like 7 years. So I don't know. Let's just say 34, 35 years later. Significant time later. And the only, like, I've said this before when I addressed it a year ago. I think something like that just disqualifies you from ministry. The only issue I've got with Morris is the only issue I have feeling bad for Morris is the same issue I have feeling bad for a death row person that gets killed 40 years later. You're just not the same person 40 years later. And I have to tell you, when this broke, like, when you hear of a school teacher that had molested someone, all of a sudden get like 12, 15 other people that come out and say, hey, he did this to me, or she did this to me, or whatever. Like, no one else came out against Morris. So apparently he learned his lesson. He repented, and then, served as a pastor for then almost the next 40 years. you can't have sympathy for someone who does that to someone who is a 12-year-old till they're like 17. You just can't. But the only thing that could be said in his defense is that not only did he never do that again, he lived, at least in terms of not having inappropriate relationships with women, he lived that above reproach then for almost the next 40 years, which causes me to think, like, why did this come out? Like, why did he have, say, 35 years of successful ministry? Only, like, if he truly repented in his heart, and maybe, God blessed him with, this man who's changed his evil ways, like, why, if he never did that again, like, why did even God allow that to come out? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of stuff going on, behind the doors, where she's reaching out to the family and they're not meeting her needs and they're trying to keep it covered up and so forth. But I would say this, where Morris maybe was never unfaithful in terms of a relationship with another woman, I would say Morris was extremely unfaithful with God when it came to his finances and to money. I would say he prostituted himself for money. A prostitute sells themselves for money. Robert Morris and many of the megachurch pastors, they sell God for money. It's not even that they prostitute themselves. They have nothing in of themselves to sell, but God does, and his message does, and they sell God for money. They prostitute God. Maybe you feel like that's too strong. I don't. To me, that is one of the most evil things, is people that get rich off the gospel. And so people don't care about that. God does. I think God cares about that as much as what Morris did when he was in his 20s. But people don't care about pastors prostituting God for money. They're all in on that. But God does. And so since people weren't going to care about that, then according to God's providence and so forth, this comes out, and a lot's happened in the last year. So I really, when I was going to do this podcast, I almost wanted to do something like I was willing to do some research for several weeks, and kind of like there's a podcast out there, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. There's just so many dynamics to how that church grew, and then how that church collapsed. I kind of I'd like to hear someone do it, because I don't have access to the information. But someone that can do some investigative reporting, interview the people at Gateway. I'd like to know how it grew so big. I mean, I understand the fall of Gateway, but what I struggle with is the rise of Gateway. Okay, I get he repented of what he did with that young lady, that girl, and seemed to be faithful morally the rest of his ministry, but he was prostituting the message of Christ's blood on the cross for his own personal gain. I just have way too much fear of God for that. Way too much fear of God for that. So how did they get so big? Was it because God blessed them, because his grace and forgiveness, and he saw Robert truly repented of what he did and had a changed heart? I don't think so, because of what I'm about to share with you here a little bit in this podcast. Is it possible that growth in church does not equal blessing? And absolutely, I believe that. Like, we have to be reminded of the Bible passage that in latter times, people aren't going to put up with sound doctrine, so they're going to surround themselves and with people that tell them what they want to hear. And that prosperity gospel that came from Gateway, like many of these other places, and a lot of these mega churches, it's not sound doctrine. And so that's where people are going to flock. So you've got to be careful not to associate great numerical growth with blessing. I don't think that's what was going on at Gateway. Not saying that they didn't do some good things, but honestly, like to the core, it was rotten. Um, in the end, why did it grow? I think in the end, Morris was a really good businessman, and really good businessmen can grow churches, especially when they run them like a business. And that's what Gateway did. And they had a lot of business professionals on staff as elders. Like I've mentioned this before. They started the exact same time we did. Like we started in 2000, they started in 2000. They started with 180 people. Well, we started with like 30. But like I mentioned, we the first 3 years that the church Light of the World began, we were in my house. We went to a movie theater. We went to a shopping center. We bought like 10 acres of land and put a 22,000 square foot building on that land, all within 3 years. I would have to look at Gateway's first 3 years, but we did not underperform Gateway by much for the first 3 years. But after that, yeah, we didn't grow very fast at all, and Gateway at least claims to have gotten up to 100,000 on a Sunday in worship. I'm not sure I believe that, but even if they only got up to 70,000, that kind of beat our 350 that we had, back in the day. So in the end, he was a good businessman. Got a lot of rich people involved. Called rich people pastors. Rich people have rich friends. Becomes a popular place to be. They were really good at marketing the church. Marketed the church better than marketing Jesus. They got a lot of people to serve as staff that did it for free or next to nothing, just for the honor and the privilege to be with such an amazing organization with such amazing people and all these rich and famous people. And so, listen, he's a good businessman. To some extent, churches have to be run as a business, but that should be as little as possible. But that's also why I have a church of 400 and not a church of 100,000. There's just things that I'm not willing to do. So, all right, what's happened in the last year? Let's delve into that just a little bit. So, most recently, just in the last month or so, Gateway's announced that they're having more staffing cuts. They stopped their Saturday services at all of their campuses except the South Lake one, and they've cut back on services basically at all of their different campuses. They've had they're not upfront with how much they've lost in terms of revenue offering, and how much they've cut staff. They don't share those numbers. That's bad publicity. That, like, you want to be part of a successful. It's grown on being the place to be. Well, you're not the place to be when you're down 50% in attendance and offering, and it's at least that. It's probably more because in November of this past year, so what, 7-8 months ago, they were already down like 40-50% in offering and in attendance. And once again, this isn't normally advertised. You just have to infer it with being able to tell how many services they have and whatever information they do choose to share. All right, so let's kind of recap this last year. So I've found an article that had recapped a bunch of this, and I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of it. In August of 2024, Gateway was sued, so he steps down in June 2024. In August of 2024, Gateway is sued for allegedly turning a blind eye to child sex assault in 2016. Now, this is an interesting one. So when bad press starts, everyone piles on. Now, Morris was not accused by anyone else of doing anything inappropriately, morally, really even ethically. And so, but people come out and said, when I went to high school there, I was groomed in the youth group because there was a senior and I was an eighth grader, and they ended up talking to me and having sex with them. I wasn't protected by my church, and so when there's blood in the water, sharks come. So in a church the size of Gateway, just stuff like that is going to go on. It can't 100% be avoided. There's responsibility not only on the pastors there, the youth leaders, but there's some individual responsibility that needs to go on there. So for me, that lawsuit, August 2024, it's kind of piling on. Blood's in the water, and so people want to make money off of it. And that's the common theme of the swamp of Gateway: money, 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 money. Right? Everything is about money. This is why I say it was rotten to the core. It's evil, and so that's what's going on here. Lawsuit filed because blood's in the water, money's in the water. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. So all of a sudden, like this lawsuit comes out that this person claimed that they were groomed while they were there. Not even really by anyone on staff, but by other people in the youth group. October 4th, 2024, Morris is sued for committing financial fraud. I said, morally, no one really came after him, and ethically, not so much. But this would be an ethical thing. There's a class action lawsuit filed in October of 2024 by church members that claim Gateway committed financial fraud by falsely promising members that a portion of their tithes would go to foreign missionary work. Former lead pastor Robert Morris had told congregants 15% or 15 million of its 100 million of annual revenue would go to global ministries. But a church member and a public accountant of Gateway alleged that only 3 million actually went a year. So basically, Morris is being sued. Once again, everything, this whole church is about money. It's a business. So Morris resigns. There's money in the water, and sharks are circling money/blood in the water, and members want a piece of it because someone felt pressured into sleeping with a senior in high school when they were in whatever grade, and the church didn't protect them. Now they're suing Morris because they say he lied about how much is going to foreign missions, and so they're wanting money from Morris because they only sent 3 million a year when Morris was promising 15 million. Now there's some character stuff going on. There's some ethical stuff going on, but now like you're trying to get money because they didn't send as much money to where they said they were going to. Well, you know what? Why were you going to a church that wasn't willing to share their books? Like I'll tell you this, at Light of the World, we have our financials that the executive board approves every year. Any member at any point can come and say, hey, I'd like to see a copy of the budget. And you can see a copy of the budget. Frankly, I'm fine if you see a copy of where we are year to date. If we said we're going to spend so much on this, that you're able to see that we really did. So shame on you for going to a church in which you believed, a church that's really about money, a guys that is getting rich off the gospel. Shame on you for not asking to see the books, for believing it. I mean, that's kind of my take on it. The church has always been just about money. November 12th, 2000, when I say the church, Gateway Church, November 12th, 2024, South Lakes Gateway cut staff following a drop in donations. A social media video, church elder Kenneth Fambro said ties were down between 35 and 40%. So already in November of last year, people are leaving in droves, and offering is down by somewhere between a third to say 40%. Well, so those were the cuts in November, and I said that within the last month or so, they've made even more cuts. November 28th, 2024, Gateway announces its main campuses. It's down to 3 church elders. They used to have 9 elders. Now they have 3. I believe the way that Gateway does things, I think elders are paid positions. They're not with us. It's volunteer. And so elders almost are like almost pastors. It's church staff there. They just call them elders rather than pastors. I think. I'm 95% sure a lot of the mega churches do it that way. So anyways, a bunch of elders quit, a bunch got fired. They had 9, and in November of 2024, they're down to 3. And it says at least 9 church elders and leaders had stepped down or were fired since summer of 2024, leaving Gateway with just 3 church elders. the same point, Gateway's attendance in its South Lake campus has seen a 40% decrease and a drop across all campuses. In March of 2025, Robert Morris was indicted on multiple child sex abuse charges. This is interesting. In Oklahoma, there's no statute of limitations on what Robert Morris did. Morris was officially, this is March of this year, just a few months ago, was officially indicted on 5 counts of lewd, indecent acts to a child in Osage County, where the alleged abuse took place. Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond announced in a press release. There's no statute of limitation in Morris's case because he was not a resident of Oklahoma at any time. So if he had been a resident of Oklahoma, there's a statute of limitations. But since he wasn't, there's not. Go figure that. Like, that makes a lot of sense, but whatever. March 17th, 2025, Robert Morris surrenders in Oklahoma on child sexual abuse charges. Morris turned himself in to Osage, Osage County, where court records showed a judge set a $50,000 bond, and Morris had to surrender his passport. Morris spent 14 minutes in jail before being released on bond. He pleaded not guilty to the charges, according to the records. In May 9th of this year, Robert Morris makes his first court appearance in Oklahoma. Morris, in a preliminary hearing in May, gave him a chance to meet with the defense attorney, prosecutor, and judge before formal preliminary hearing. His attorneys can try to work out a plea deal, but if one isn't offered to Morris and he doesn't accept, or if one is and he doesn't accept the plea deal, he'll be scheduled for a preliminary hearing. The next court date is set for September 4th of this year. If found guilty, he could face a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison for each charge. Morris is 63. There's 4 charges, I think I'm remembering. 80 years. So he would potentially have to be in prison until he's 143 years old. June 12th, 2025. This is where actually, this is it's going to be the next one. June 12th, 2025. Cindy Clemshire, that's the person who was abused, was in the relationship and abused by Morris. She sues Gateway Church and Morris for defamation. Clemshire is now suing Gateway, Morris, and his wife for defamation and failing to report the alleged abuse that happened to her. The lawsuit pointed to Morris's previous statement acknowledging the abuse claims, where he referred to Clemshire as a young lady. The suit claims Morris, his wife, Gateway, all the elders benefited financially from hiding any known information about sexual abuse claims from Clemshire. It also accuses them of acting with actual malice. The suit accuses them of defamation, libel, slander, failure to report, civil conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and unjust enrichment. So another lawsuit to try to get money. Speaking of lawsuits and trying to get money, Gateway filed a lawsuit against Morris. Everyone's suing everyone for after refusing his request, asking for millions of dollars as part of his retirement. So Gateway claims that Morris asked for $1 million up front at his retirement. Then he asked for $800,000 a year. $800,000 a year until he turned 70, followed by $600,000 a year for the rest of his and his wife's lives after he stepped down. So when he stepped down, for word coming out that he molested a girl for 7 years, Morris wanted $1 million up front. He wanted $800,000 a year until he turned 70. So for the next, at that time, 8 years, followed by $600,000 a year for the rest of his and his wife's lives. The church accused Morris of being laser focused on securing his retirement payout. Morris' lawyers met with Gateway less than 2 months after resigning to request financial commitments from the church, and they sent a letter demanding his payment the month after, according to court records. Morris's attorneys argued the church forced him out of his position and claimed that the church lied about how much they knew about the extent of the alleged abuse. They claimed the church elders knew for 2 decades. And in another article, the lawyers were warning that if the church doesn't pay up, this is like extortion, Morris is going to be upfront with just how much the elders knew. See, let's drain the swamp. And this is why when it's evil at the core, everything about it's evil. Listen, theologically, I think it's wrong and borderline evil, the prosperity gospel. I believe it's evil, like to get rich off the gospel. But you know what else is evil? When you've lied about how much the elders knew, when the elders knew this and no one cared and no one said anything about it, like it's rotten to its core. Rotten to its core. In May 25th, 2025, Gateway announced they had a new senior pastor. It's all about money. Money, 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 money. And it shouldn't be. This is why, like, I share with my church, like every church I visit, especially the mega churches, they all talk about offerings and the importance of offerings. Every service, we couldn't be doing this at such and such church if we didn't this, that. Like, they're always talking about money, and I don't. Why? Because I have a sensitivity to the fact that is the perception. That's all the church cares about, because it's all that they talk about. So I don't. Now, I teach tithing. When people go to new member class, I teach tithing. I practice tithing. Once or twice a year, I will talk about it in a church service, but it's not normally like the only topic. It comes as part of, like, I did financial chaos recently, and I talked about the importance of tithing. It was just like maybe 2 minutes of a 40-minute message. But all these other churches, they just talk about money. And it drives me nuts if they're trying to get a deal on something, like if they're trying to expand their property, their building, they're trying to make everyone do it for free, basically. Like, they don't want them to make any money on it. Like, they're always talking others down, but then they're always trying to get as much money as possible. And it absolutely drives me nuts that the perception's out there, and it's far too real. All the church really cares about is people's money. The people that give the most, they have the most say. It's wrong. It's evil. Getting rich off the gospel, it's wrong. It's evil. And you know what? Here's the deal. Like, I can't help but wonder if Gateway's lost half their attendance, and if they really were 100,000, which I doubt, but if they were, where'd these 50,000 people go? We're located in northern Tarrant County. Gateway's located in northern Tarrant County. Where'd they go? We've had a couple come by Light of the World, but most haven't stayed. I don't know that I know everyone that's come from Gateway. Like, I just had a conversation over the last few weeks with a person I've been trying to help going through a difficult time, and he mentioned that they came from Gateway. But we haven't had a mass increase in attendance when these 50,000 people started looking for churches. Where'd they go? Did they get disillusioned with church and just stop going? Did they go to the next biggest mega church in the area? Probably that's where a lot went, because they don't want to go to medium-sized church. They want the feel good. They want the prestige. You went to Gateway because it was a cool place to be. It ain't cool to go to a place that has 400 on a Sunday. It's cool going to a place that has 100,000 or has 50,000 or 20,000. You know, the swamp is being drained at Gateway, and I want to ask you, what's the worst part? What would you say is the worst part of the swamp of Gateway? Is it what Morris did? Is it that the elders covered it up because apparently they actually did know? Is it that they're a business that was designed to manipulate people with a prosperity gospel to get them to give more so that they could be blessed more? Or is it that Morris and others got filthy rich off of the blood of Jesus? There's a lot of bodies in that swamp. Which one's the worst? Appreciate you joining me for this episode of God Talk. I look forward to talking to you again next week. God bless.